In a quaint town nestled beneath the snow-kissed hills of New Hampshire, Christmas was more than just a date on the calendar. It was an atmosphere. The streets shimmered with a galaxy of lights. Each shop window was a stage showcasing festive wreaths and ribbons, and the crisp air was infused with the comforting aroma of pine and cinnamon. Yet, above a humble laundromat, in a weathered apartment, Christmas felt like a distant dream. 6-year-old Ellie, her brow furrowed in concentration, sat on a worn carpet, her tongue peeking out from between her lips. A vibrant red crayon was clutched tightly in her small hand. Her golden curls danced with each stroke as she painstakingly wrote, each letter a testament to her determination. "Dear Santa at the corner office," she began. The words were born from an overheard conversation, the idea that the people who possessed the power to change things, the ones who could perform real miracles, resided in corner offices. And if Santa was real, then surely he had one too, didn't he? Her mother, Clara, moved with a quiet grace in the cramped kitchen. Her blonde hair, usually a cascade of sunshine, was hastily arranged in a messy bun, with strands framing a face that was tired, yet radiated kindness. Her uniform sleeves were dusted with flour, remnants of her early morning shift at the bakery. She hummed a gentle tune, unaware that her voice trembled with exhaustion. The old radiator had given up again, leaving a space heater to buzz futilely near the window, barely holding back the winter's chill. On the small table, unopened bills formed a stark tableau: rent, heating oil, and a stern warning notice from the landlord, a symphony of financial woes. Clara glanced over, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Sweetheart, who are you writing to?" Ellie looked up, her eyes sparkling with hope. "To Santa, but not the North Pole one. This one works in a corner office. Maybe he knows more, Mommy." Clara chuckled softly, the sound tinged with a deep-seated sadness. "Let me know if he writes back, sweetie." That night, Ellie carefully folded her letter, slipped it into a bright red envelope, and scribbled across the front, "Santa at the corner office. Important." The next morning, she dropped it into the large green mailbox outside the bakery, oblivious to the sign indicating it was for company mail only. 3 blocks away, the sleek, glass-encased building of Halridge Estates hummed with pre-Christmas energy. Staff bustled through meetings, their voices echoing in the modern space. Christmas trees twinkled in every corner, casting a festive glow, and the top floor, the coveted corner office, belonged to CEO Graham Halridge. Graham, a man of 42, stood tall in a tailored suit, his dark hair showing streaks of gray. His office offered a panoramic view of the town, a view that he had grown blind to. Since Anna's passing, a veil of detachment had fallen over everything, dimming even the brightest lights of Christmas. That afternoon, an intern interrupted a quarterly meeting with the finance team, handing Graham a stack of misdirected letters. One envelope caught his eye, small, child-sized, and adorned with a shaky, handwritten address. Graham raised an eyebrow, slit the envelope open, and began to read. "Dear Santa, at the corner office, I do not want toys. I do not even want candy. I just want a house where my mommy can stop crying. We try to be good. She works a lot and always gives me the last toast even when she is hungry. I want her to have warm feet again and to smile when she sleeps. If you are real, can you help? Love, Ellie." I am 6. The room faded away. Graham froze, the voices and figures around him dissolving into a distant murmur. He read the letter again and again. He pictured a small girl with sunlit curls and a weary mother sacrificing the last bite of food for her child. "Graham," one of the managers said, noticing his sudden silence, "is everything all right?" He waved a hand, his gaze fixed on the letter. "Give me a moment." He rose, walked to the window, and held the letter gently between his fingers. It had been 3 years since Anna's death, 3 years since he sat by her side in the sterile hospital room, watching as cancer ravaged her body. Before the diagnosis, they had been preparing to adopt a little girl around 6 years old, a girl with curly blonde hair. Anna had already knitted a sweater for her, a testament to her love and anticipation. The sweater still sat untouched in a drawer by the window seat, a painful reminder of what could have been. He had buried that part of himself, locking away the dreams and hopes that had once filled his life. Until now, Ellie's letter didn't just stir memories. It shattered the carefully constructed walls around his heart. Not because she resembled the daughter they never had, but because her words resonated with a sincerity and purity that no adult ever dared to voice. Asterisk, a letter misdelivered? Or maybe not. Asterisk, he looked again at the trembling handwriting. Asterisk, can you help? He whispered into the stillness of the room. Maybe I can. The evening after the meeting, Graham sat alone in his expansive office, the city lights twinkling below like scattered diamonds. Outside, the sky had turned the color of pewter as snow fell in slow, silent spirals. On his mahogany desk lay Ellie's letter, its edges softened from being opened and reread too many times. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and, for the first time in years, allowed the memories to flood back. Anna had always been the brighter half of their partnership. Her hair was the pale blonde of winter sunlight, and her laughter had the power to fill any room. She painted in soft pastels, baked lopsided birthday cakes with unwavering enthusiasm, and danced barefoot in the kitchen on weekends. She found joy in the cracks of ordinary life, in the small, everyday moments that most people overlooked. She had wanted a child with a fierce tenderness that both moved and humbled him. Maybe she'll have curls, Anna would whisper, snuggling beside him on the couch. Golden curls that shine like yours. My hair's not golden, he'd joke, gently teasing her. Then she'll get mine, she'd grin, her eyes sparkling with mischief. A little girl with bright blonde hair. I can see her already. But nature or fate had other plans. After 2 failed fertility treatments, they turned to adoption, their hearts filled with hope. They filled out countless forms, sat through parenting classes, and finally were approved. One day, the agency presented them with a file. Inside was a photograph of a little girl, no older than 5, with soft curls and a hesitant smile. Anna burst into tears the moment she saw it. She's the one, Graham. I know it. In the weeks that followed, Anna began knitting a pale yellow sweater with tiny white star-shaped buttons. She worked on it tirelessly, even during chemo sessions, her hands steady even when her body faltered. On good days, she hummed softly as the yarn slipped through her fingers. On bad days, she barely spoke, but the sweater grew stitch by stitch, a symbol of her unwavering hope. She'll wear this when she comes home, she said once, her voice faint, but filled with conviction. Graham didn't point out the tremor in her hands. As Anna's condition worsened, so did the adoption timeline. The agency eventually called, explaining that they would have to place the child with another family. They were kind but firm, emphasizing the need for stability. They understood the situation. Anna didn't argue. She simply held the unfinished sweater to her chest that night and wept until morning. 3 months later, she was gone. After her death, Graham became mechanical, a man driven by routine. He rose early, buried himself in meetings and numbers, handled everything with ruthless efficiency. Work didn't ask him to feel. It offered a refuge from the pain. That was its appeal. He stopped going to parks, skipped family holidays, ignored birthdays. Anything involving children was strictly off-limits. The house remained immaculate, a pristine museum curated by grief. But he never got rid of the yellow sweater. It remained neatly folded in the bottom drawer of the window seat in his room, untouched, but never forgotten. Sometimes, when the silence became too heavy, he would open the drawer and look at it. He never took it out, just looked, then closed the drawer before the ache could rise too far. Now, in his office, the city asleep beneath a blanket of fresh snow, Graham reached into his coat pocket and pulled out Ellie's letter once more. He traced the crooked lines with his fingertips, feeling the weight of her simplicity, her hope, her rawness. She hadn't asked for toys or candy, just a house, so her mother could stop crying. That small, honest plea cracked something deep inside him. A warmth stirred in a place that had been frozen for years. He clutched the letter to his chest and leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat. His shoulders began to shake. He tried to breathe through it, but he couldn't. For the first time since Anna's passing, tears welled up in his eyes. One fell, then another and another. He covered his face with his hands as a sob broke loose, deep, rough, and raw, pulled from a place long hidden. The little girl's letter blurred behind his tears. She didn't know him. She hadn't even meant for the letter to land on his desk. But somehow her words, those unguarded childlike hopes, had reached straight into the coldest part of him, and they had woken something up, something he didn't know still lived, and he would not ignore it. The next morning, Graham arrived at the office earlier than usual. He carried no briefcase, no tablet, only Ellie's letter, folded carefully in the inside pocket of his coat. His assistant, Lena, was already at her desk, sipping coffee and scanning emails. She glanced up, startled. "You're never in before me," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Is something wrong?" "I need your help," he replied, placing the letter on her desk. "I need to find the girl who wrote this." Lena picked up the envelope and read the letter silently. Her expression softened as she reached the last line. "Do we know anything else?" she asked. "Only this," he said, pointing to a faint pencil scrawl on the envelope. "A partial return address, a street name, no number, no city, but it is local. I need you to find them. The child, the mother, both." Lena hesitated. "Should I go through the agency we used before?" "No," Graham said quietly. "This is personal." She asked no further questions. By afternoon, she returned to his office with a printed sheet and a knowing look. "There is one apartment building on that street. Unit 4B, she said. "Rented to Clara Winslow, single mother. Works night shifts at the bakery on Main Street. Daughter's name is Eleanor Winslow. Goes by Ellie, 6 years old." Graham stared at the name, running a thumb along the edge of the paper. "Would you like me to call her?" Lena asked. He stood. "No, I will go myself." Clara was sweeping the entryway of their tiny apartment when a knock sounded. Firm, polite, unfamiliar. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door cautiously. A tall man stood in the hallway dressed in a charcoal coat, December wind still clinging to his shoulders. He looked utterly out of place in the dim corridor. "Miss Winslow?" he asked. She nodded, guarded. "Yes. My name is Graham Hellridge." He hesitated, clearing his throat. "I believe your daughter wrote me a letter." Clara's brows drew together. "I do not understand." He reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope addressed in Ellie's careful handwriting. "She sent this to Santa at the corner office. It ended up at my desk. I run Hellridge Estates." Clara blinked, baffled. This must be a mistake. Before she could say more, Ellie appeared, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She spotted the envelope in Graham's hand, then looked up at him with dawning excitement. "You are him," she whispered. "You are Santa at the corner office." Graham gave a soft, disbelieving smile. "I suppose I am." Ellie rushed forward and threw her arms around his legs before Clara could react. "Ellie, no," Clara protested, her cheeks flushing. "It is all right," Graham said gently, lowering himself to one knee. "Hello, Ellie." She leaned back to grin at him. "You got my letter?" "I did, and it was the most important thing I have read in a very long time." Clara stepped between them slightly, still wary. "Look, I do not know what you think is happening, but we are not a charity case." "I know that," Graham said, sincerity steady in his voice. "This is not charity. I simply wanted to meet the little girl who wrote something that reminded me what it feels like to feel." Clara hesitated, studying him. Something in his expression, perhaps the tired honesty, softened her stance. At last she stepped aside. "You can come in. Just for a moment." Inside, the apartment was small but warm. A little tree with 3 ornaments stood in the corner, casting colorful shadows. Ellie spread her coloring books out on the rug, eager to show him every page, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. And then Graham saw it when the sunlight through the window brushed her curls. When she smiled up at him with bright, unguarded eyes, the memory hit him like a blow. The photograph Anna had once held, the little girl they almost adopted. Ellie looked just like her. His breath caught. Time stopped. Not because Ellie was a shadow of the life he lost, but because here she was, real and alive, in a tiny apartment that smelled faintly of crayons and cinnamon, and she had called him Santa. The snow kept falling. Days blurred together with the kind of hush only December brings. Graham, still unsure of the why or how, had offered Clara and Ellie a place to stay, at least through Christmas. The guest house, nestled behind the estate beneath tall pines, seemed made for peace. Ivy climbed its stone walls, and golden light glowed warmly from its windows. It felt a world away from the cold, crumbling apartment Clara and Ellie had left behind. Clara had hesitated, her eyes filled with uncertainty. She was wary, uncertain of his intentions. But Ellie, full of wonder, had tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Maybe this is Santa's house too." Clara agreed with one firm condition. "I'll cook. I'll clean. I don't want to feel like a guest," she said, her chin lifting with quiet pride. Graham only nodded, humbled by her integrity. From the first morning, something shifted within the walls of the guest house. Clara awoke before dawn, her blonde hair pulled into a loose bun, sleeves pushed up as she moved through the small kitchen, humming softly. Her eyes still carried the weight of too many sleepless nights, but they sparkled when Ellie came bounding in, asking for snowman pancakes with a giggle. One morning, Ellie tripped and scraped her knee. Clara didn't panic or scold. She simply knelt, cradled the child gently, and sang a lullaby so soft it stilled the room. Graham had stood quietly at the top of the stairs, frozen, not because of the melody, but because of how Clara filled the space around her with a quiet sense of peace. He had never seen anything like it. Meanwhile, Ellie had attached herself to Graham completely, drawn to his quiet strength and kindness. Each day brought a new picture, a wild question, or a plea for help. They spent long hours together finishing a wooden ship Graham had started years ago, but never completed, a symbol of his unfinished life. One afternoon, as the snow fell thick and soft outside, Ellie pointed to the carved figurehead and asked, "Who is she?" Graham paused, his eyes clouding with memory. "A fairy," he said gently, "with hair like snow. She used to live here before she turned into stardust." Ellie gave a solemn nod, and later that night, she added a tiny paper crown to the ship's bow, crowning the fairy queen of their imaginations. Clara watched from a distance, her heart softening with each passing day. She noticed the way Graham bent low to meet Ellie's gaze, how his hands were steady, kind. At first, she stayed guarded, wary of letting her hopes soar too high, but slowly, she began to see something more behind his stillness, something gentle and genuine. One evening, while Clara was upstairs putting Ellie to bed, Graham visited their old apartment. He'd already sent someone ahead with the paperwork, ensuring their belongings were handled with care. By the time he returned, the past had been erased. No more unpaid rent, no more looming heating bill, no eviction notice taped to the door, casting a shadow over their lives. He never told her, wanting it to be a silent gift. But the next morning, under Ellie's pillow, he left a small card. The handwriting was steady, careful. "Santa always hears the wishes of the truest hearts." Clara found it later. She said nothing, but that night, as she tucked Ellie in, her hand lingered a moment longer on the blanket, as if sending a silent blessing into the night. Then the storm came. A blizzard swept through the town, knocking out power across the region, plunging homes into darkness. In the guest house, candles flickered, casting warm, dancing shadows on the walls. Graham built a roaring fire in the hearth, and Clara made cocoa, heating biscuits in a pan over the flames. Ellie curled up between them, her eyes reflecting the soft light like stars, her presence a comforting weight against their sides. They spoke quietly, voices hushed, sharing stories and dreams in the flickering candlelight. "I used to dream of owning a bakery," Clara said, staring into the fire, her voice tinged with longing. "Nothing big, just a little place with a yellow awning and a chalkboard menu." Graham turned to her, his gaze searching her face. "What stopped you?" She gave a small, sad smile. "Bill's life, Ellie. And somewhere along the way I stopped believing it could still be mine." They sat in silence, the kind that did not feel empty or awkward. Graham studied her face, noting how strength and softness coexisted in her eyes, a testament to her resilience. Ellie had dozed off in Clara's lap, her thumb tucked under her chin, golden hair spilling across her arm. Graham whispered, "You really do make this house feel alive again." Clara looked up, caught off guard by his words, but his face held no pity, only quiet sincerity. She did not speak. She just smiled faintly, a hint of warmth touching her lips. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it was close enough. The days before Christmas drifted by like snowflakes, each one unique and fleeting, one gentle moment after another. The guest house was warmer now, not just from the fire, but from the laughter that echoed through its walls, filling every corner with joy. Clara's cookies filled the air with the comforting aroma of cinnamon and clove, and Ellie never strayed far from Graham's side, chatting endlessly about snow angels, and how maybe Santa had traded his sleigh for a corner office, a place where he could still work his magic. But beneath the surface, a subtle shift was occurring within Clara. One afternoon, returning from the store, she passed the main house. Its front door was ajar, and from the porch, she heard Graham's voice, low and sincere, carrying on the winter breeze. "I want to find a way for them to stay past Christmas," he said. "I don't want them to feel like this is temporary." He was speaking to Lena, his trusted assistant. Clara recognized the calm, professional tone of his voice, the kind he used when discussing matters of utmost importance. Clara froze, her footsteps faltering. Her heart fluttered with something unfamiliar, a mixture of hope and fear. But then, just as quickly, it dropped, replaced by a chilling doubt. She stepped away before she could hear more, her mind racing with uncertainty. That night, her phone buzzed with a message from a former coworker she hadn't spoken to in months, a woman known for her cynicism. "Careful, Clara. I know men like him. Rich guys don't give without wanting something back." She stared at the screen, the words burning into her mind. She shut off the phone, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. The words stayed with her, festering in the darkness. The next morning, she skipped breakfast with Graham and Ellie, claiming she had errands to run. When Graham offered to help bring down holiday boxes from the attic, she refused, her voice strained. She began speaking less, smiling less, looking away whenever he looked her way, a subtle withdrawal that created a palpable distance. Graham noticed the change immediately, his brow furrowed with concern. So did Ellie, who sensed the shift in her mother's demeanor and clung to her side with worried eyes. One evening, Graham invited them to walk the garden path, now illuminated with strings of delicate white lights, creating a magical winter wonderland. Clara shook her head, her gaze fixed on the floor. "It's cold," she said, avoiding his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked gently, reaching out to touch her arm. "I'm sure," she replied, pulling away slightly. "You two go." He nodded, his heart heavy with unspoken words, but something in his chest pulled tight, a premonition of something lost. He left with Ellie, who kept glancing back toward the guest house, her small face etched with worry. That night, once the house was still, Clara sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly. Behind her, a half-packed duffel bag waited on the floor, a silent testament to her inner turmoil. She picked up a pen and wrote slowly, her heart aching with each word. "Dear Graham, thank you for everything. For the warmth, for the kindness, for making us feel like we belonged, if only for a little while. But we can't stay. This world, it's not ours. Wishing you peace, Clara." She folded the letter, placed it on the table, and turned off the lights, plunging the room into darkness. Quietly, she packed Ellie's things. A few clothes, a beloved stuffed bunny, a crayon drawing torn carefully from the wall, each item a precious memento of their brief stay. She had just zipped the last pouch when a small voice behind her whispered, "Where are we going?" Clara turned, her heart clenching with guilt. Ellie stood in the doorway, her blanket clutched in her hand, her eyes wide with sleep and fear, a silent question hanging in the air. "We're just heading home," Clara said softly, kneeling beside her and stroking her hair. Ellie's lips trembled. Her gaze moved to the bags, then back up to her mother's face, her eyes searching for answers. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Clara knelt beside her, her own eyes filled with tears. "Because this isn't really our life, sweetheart. It was just a visit, a dream that can't last." She was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Graham's voice, gentle and low, drifted into the room. "Clara? Ellie? May I come in?" Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at Ellie, her face a mixture of fear and sadness, then took a deep breath and opened the door. Graham stood in the doorway, his face etched with concern. He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the half-packed bags. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. Clara looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "We're leaving," she said softly. Graham stepped closer, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "Why? What happened?" Clara's voice broke as she finally looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resignation. "I can't explain," she said. "You wouldn't understand." Graham reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. "Try me," he said softly. "Please." Clara hesitated, her heart torn between her desire to stay and her fear of getting hurt. She took a deep breath and began to explain, her voice trembling with emotion. She told him about the message from her coworker, about her fears of not being good enough, about her belief that she and Ellie didn't belong in his world. Graham listened patiently, his eyes never leaving hers. When she had finished, he took her other hand in his touch gentle but firm. "Clara," he said softly, "I know you're scared, but you're wrong. You do belong here. Both of you do. You've brought more joy and light into my life than I ever thought possible. Please don't leave. Give us a chance." Clara looked at him, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. "I don't know if I can," she said. "I'm so afraid of getting hurt." Graham smiled gently, his eyes filled with love. "I know," he said, "but I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you. Just give me a chance." Clara hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded slowly, her eyes filled with tears. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Graham smiled, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He pulled her into his arms and held her close, his touch gentle and reassuring. He knew that they still had a long way to go, but he was willing to do whatever it took to make it work. He loved Clara, and he wasn't going to let her go without a fight. Ellie ran to them and wrapped her arms around their legs, her face beaming with joy. "I knew you wouldn't leave," she said, her voice filled with happiness. "I knew Santa would take care of us." Graham smiled and picked her up, holding her close. "That's right, sweetheart," he said. "Santa's going to take care of you." The next morning, Graham took Clara and Ellie for a drive, a surprise he had kept secret until the last moment. Clara was apprehensive, still unsure of what to expect, but Ellie was ecstatic, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. They drove in quiet through the outskirts of town, the silence comfortable and filled with unspoken emotions. Pines lined the road, heavy with snow, creating a winter wonderland. The world felt hushed and serene, as if holding its breath in anticipation. When the car slowed and turned into the small cemetery near the woods, Clara's breath caught in her throat. She glanced at Graham, her eyes filled with confusion and fear, but he kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his expression unreadable. They parked near a path of stone markers, the ground blanketed in a thick layer of white snow. Graham stepped out of the car and opened the trunk, his movements deliberate and controlled. He pulled out a simple bouquet of white lilies wrapped in brown paper, their delicate petals glistening in the sunlight. Clara followed him through the snow-covered path, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure of what to expect. They walked in silence until they reached a modest headstone, its surface dusted with snow. "Anna Hellridge, The inscription read, "Beloved wife, bright soul, forever a light." Graham knelt and placed the bouquet at the base of the marker, his touch gentle and reverent. He brushed away a few fallen pine needles, then stood silently, his gaze fixed on the headstone. Clara waited beside him, her hands in her coat pockets, unsure of what to say or do. She felt a pang of sympathy for Graham, for the loss he had endured, for the love he had lost. After a long pause, Graham finally spoke, his voice soft and filled with emotion. "She was everything you might imagine," he said. "Light in every room, fierce in every fight. She made life feel like an adventure, every day a new opportunity for joy." His voice did not tremble, but there was a weight to it, a deep sadness that spoke of a love that had been cut short, the kind that came from remembering without being consumed. "We wanted a child," he continued, his gaze fixed on the headstone. "We were weeks away from adopting, a little girl, golden-haired, quiet eyes. Anna had already knitted her a sweater, a symbol of our hope." Clara's eyes softened, her heart aching for the couple who had longed for a child. She imagined Anna, her hands diligently knitting the sweater, her heart filled with love and anticipation. "But when Anna's health collapsed, I let the adoption go," Graham said, his voice filled with regret. "I told myself I was protecting the child, saving her from the pain of loss. Truth is, I was protecting myself, shielding myself from the possibility of future heartbreak." He turned toward Clara then, his eyes steady and filled with sincerity. "For years, I closed every door that led to anything resembling love, convinced that I could never love again. I kept busy, efficient, safe, afraid to open my heart to the possibility of future pain." He took a breath, his chest rising and falling slowly. "Until Ellie's letter," he said softly. "Until you." Clara looked away, blinking quickly, her heart overwhelmed by emotion. "But this is not just about Ellie," he said gently, taking her hand in his. "She is extraordinary, a bright light in a world that often feels dark." He paused, then stepped closer, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "Yes, but it was you, Clara, who opened my eyes, who showed me that it was possible to love again. You brought warmth into rooms that had forgotten how to hold it. You brought music into silence, you smiled at strangers. Even when you were exhausted, you gave without ever asking for more." He paused, then stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Anna is a part of me I will always carry, a cherished memory that will never fade. But she is not holding my heart anymore. That part woke up for you, Clara. You showed me what it felt like to live again." Clara's lips parted, but she said nothing, overwhelmed by the emotions that surged through her. Graham's voice grew quiet, but more certain than ever, his words filled with a love that was both tender and strong. "Clara, I thought I could never love again. I truly believed that my heart was closed forever. And then, somewhere between your laughter in the kitchen and the way you hold your daughter when she sleeps, I started hoping again, dreaming of a future filled with joy and love." He held her gaze, his eyes filled with adoration. "I find myself waiting for your voice in the morning, for your footsteps down the hall, for the way your face softens when you're lost in thought. You are not Anna, Clara. You are you, and it is you I love, for everything that you are." The cold air stilled between them, as if holding its breath in anticipation. Clara swallowed hard, her breath visible in the winter air, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She reached for his hand, took it gently, and lifted it to rest over her heart, her touch sending a silent message of love and trust. Her voice was quiet but clear, filled with a sincerity that echoed through the stillness of the cemetery. "I am scared too, Graham," she said, her eyes searching his. "But this," she pressed his hand just slightly against her chest, "this is beating for you, and for the first time in years, I feel alive again." And for the first time in years, Graham felt the weight in his chest give way to something bright and warm. Not grief, not memory, but love. Living, breathing, undeniable love. The days that followed the visit to the cemetery were quiet, but something profound had shifted between Graham and Clara, a connection that was undeniable, gentle, and complete. They had faced their fears and doubts, and had emerged stronger, their love deepened and solidified by the trials they had overcome. There were no grand declarations after that moment, no promises made in haste, just a new kind of stillness, a quiet peace that settled over their lives. Clara moved through the house with a softer gaze, her laughter ringing through the halls, filling every corner with joy. And Graham found himself looking up more often, listening for her voice, for Ellie's footsteps on the stairs, for the sound of life returning to his home. But Graham had never been one for half measures, especially when it came to love. True love deserved more than just warmth and affection. It deserved commitment, security, and a promise of forever. One morning, before the sun had fully risen, Graham drove to the county office, his heart filled with purpose. It was snowing lightly as he stepped inside the small government building, the flakes swirling around him like tiny diamonds. The woman at the front desk recognized his name immediately, her eyes widening with surprise. Still, he waited patiently, filled out each form with steady hands, and signed his name with quiet purpose, his actions speaking louder than words. The paperwork was not for a simple donation or a financial gift, it was for a joint guardianship petition, a legal step toward permanence, toward family. It was a declaration of his commitment to both Clara and Ellie, a promise to love and protect them for the rest of his life. The name on the form read Ellie Winslow Hellridge. Mother, Clara Winslow. Father, pending Graham Hellridge. He did. He wouldn't tell Clara. Not yet. Words felt hollow, insufficient. He wanted to show her, not with fleeting pronouncements, but with something tangible, something real that would speak volumes of his intentions. Later that day, a comforting aroma greeted him upon his return. Gingerbread, thick and warm, permeated the house. He found Ellie in the living room, meticulously constructing a precarious tower from brightly colored cookie tins, her brow furrowed in concentration. And Clara, in the kitchen, was humming softly, a melody he was beginning to recognize as contentment. He retreated upstairs to his office, a space usually reserved for work, now holding the seeds of something much more personal. From a drawer, he extracted a thick manila envelope, its weight substantial in his hand. He sat at his desk, the familiar wood now feeling charged with purpose, and penned a note by hand. The flow of ink faltered only once, when the enormity of what he was doing threatened to overwhelm him. That evening, after dinner, as Clara entered the sitting room to tidy up, her gaze fell upon a folder resting neatly on the old writing desk. Atop it lay a single sheet of paper, folded carefully in thirds. Her name was written across the front in his familiar script. Clara. A whisper of anticipation fluttered in her chest. She unfolded it slowly, deliberately, savoring the moment. Clara, I know what it means to lose something you never thought you could live without, the kind of loss that reshapes your very being. I also know what it means to find something you never dared to hope for, a second chance at a happiness you thought was gone forever. I am not asking for a yes today, not in so many words, but I am letting you know that I am all in, wholeheartedly and without reservation. I want to build a home with you, a sanctuary filled with laughter and love, a place where we can truly be ourselves. I want to be Ellie's father, to guide her and support her, to be a constant presence in her life. And I want to be your partner, your confidant, your rock in every quiet morning and every messy, unpredictable afternoon this life has to offer. If you are ready, if your heart echoes the yearning in mine, if your soul whispers yes, then know that I am here, waiting, with open arms and an unwavering commitment. Yours, Graham. She sank into the nearest chair, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She stared at the papers beneath the letter, documents, legal forms, the kind that signified permanence, commitment, a future. Did you see the picture I made? Ellie popped her head into the room, clutching a bright red crayon in one hand, her eyes shining with innocent pride. Clara blinked, startled from her reverie, momentarily disoriented by the force of her emotions. Picture? Ellie skipped into the room, holding up a sheet of paper for Clara's inspection. On it, she had drawn 3 stick figures. One tall with a lopsided tie, one with flowing yellow hair and a carefully drawn bun, and one small figure with a smile so wide it nearly touched both ears. They stood in front of a white house, rendered in crayon with charming imperfection, the roof dusted with what could only be snow, and at the top, scrawled in bright red crayon, were the words, "Santa is my daddy now." Clara's breath caught in her throat, a lump forming there that threatened to choke her. She looked from the drawing to the letter in her hands, then back to Ellie, who was beaming with unadulterated joy. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision, but her lips curved into a smile that felt like it had been waiting years to surface. It wasn't a grand proposal, not with flowers or rings or elaborate declarations. It was something quieter, something deeper, truer. A man offering not just love, but a home, a family, a future. A father claiming a child with no conditions, no hesitations, only unwavering devotion. And for the first time in years, Clara didn't feel like she was standing in someone else's life, playing a role she hadn't auditioned for. She felt like she was finally, truly, fully home. Snow blanketed the Halridge estate, a pristine white canvas reflecting the pale morning sun. The trees stood silent and majestic in the biting cold, their bare branches dusted with frost, as if nature itself was holding its breath in anticipation. In the garden, beneath an arch of evergreen branches adorned with vibrant holly berries and delicate white ribbon, a small, intimate winter wedding was about to begin. It was simple, quiet, perfect in its understated elegance. Only a few close friends and longtime staff members were present, their faces glowing with warmth amidst the winter chill. 2 rows of chairs lined the snowy aisle, each draped with a soft white blanket for warmth. At the front stood a tall, elegant pine tree, decorated entirely with Ellie's handmade ornaments. Painted pine cones, shimmering paper stars, and one undeniably crooked heart that proclaimed, in bright crayon, "Mommy plus Santa," a testament to a love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of places. Graham waited at the makeshift altar, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dark winter suit. His hands were folded in front of him, betraying a slight tremor of anticipation. But when Clara stepped into view, a profound shift occurred in his expression. The anxiety melted away, replaced by an overwhelming wave of love and admiration. She wore a modest white dress with long sleeves, the simple yet elegant hem grazing the snow-covered ground. Her blonde hair was curled softly, swept to one side with a delicate sprig of holly tucked above her ear. She didn't look like a fairy tale princess or a storybook bride, adorned in extravagant finery. She looked real, grounded, steady, and radiantly beautiful in her simplicity. She looked like home, and to Graham that was everything. As she reached him, he took her hand in his fingers intertwining with hers, a silent promise of support and unwavering devotion. He leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear, and whispered, "I'm not marrying the past, Clara. I'm marrying the future, and that future is you." Clara's eyes welled with tears, but she refused to blink, determined to etch every second of this moment into her memory. Ellie stood to the side, a vision of pure joy in a miniature white dress, her cheeks rosy from the cold. She tossed handfuls of dried flower petals into the air, watching them flutter and fall like delicate snowflakes. Then, seized by an irrepressible surge of happiness, she twirled with theatrical grace, her skirt spinning around her like a whimsical snowflake. The ceremony was short, but every word resonated with profound meaning and heartfelt sincerity. No one present would ever forget the palpable love that filled the air. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Clara and Graham turned to Ellie, their faces radiant with love. She ran into their arms without hesitation, and they held each other tight, laughing, breathless, and finally irrevocably whole. That night, after the last of the guests had departed and the snow outside muffled the sounds of the world beyond their sanctuary, the newly formed little family gathered by the crackling fire in the main house. Wrapped in warm blankets, they watched the flames dance behind the glass, a mesmerizing display of light and warmth against the winter's darkness. Above the fireplace, hung with quiet reverence, a simple wooden frame held Ellie's cherished letter, the one addressed to Santa at the corner office, the letter that had set in motion a chain of events that had irrevocably changed their lives. Beside it was a small, faded photograph of Anna, smiling brightly under the summer sun, her pale hair lifting gently in the wind. Not a haunting ghost, but a quiet blessing, a gentle reminder of a love that had paved the way for this new beginning. Clara glanced at the photo, then back at Graham, her heart overflowing with gratitude. He reached for her hand, his touch a reassuring presence. She gave it a soft squeeze, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had undertaken together. On the rug, Ellie lay sprawled, her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously colored something with deep focus. After a few minutes, she stood, stretched her small limbs, and handed Graham a folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly, deliberately, savoring the moment. The handwriting was neater this time, more deliberate, more controlled. Dear Santa at the corner office. You didn't bring me a toy this year. You brought me home. And love. That's more than I ever asked for. Thank you. Very much. Love Ellie. Graham's throat tightened with emotion, rendering him momentarily speechless. He could only nod, his eyes brimming with tears. Clara rested her head against his shoulder, a silent expression of her own overwhelming emotions. Ellie, sensing the unspoken connection between them, climbed into their laps without a word, nestled between them, exhaled softly, and let her eyes drift closed, secure in the warmth and safety of their embrace. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in a serene hush. Inside, something sacred settled over them. Not just warmth, but peace, a profound and abiding sense of belonging, a kind of hard-earned joy that had been forged in the fires of loss and ultimately tempered by unwavering hope. A little girl had written a letter from a cold apartment above a laundromat, her heart filled with a longing for a family, for a home. And somehow, against all odds, that letter had found its way to the right desk, and love, at long last, had found its way home. Thank you for watching this heartfelt journey of love, healing, and unexpected miracles. If Ellie's story has moved you, reminded you that hope can blossom from the smallest voices, we invite you to be part of something meaningful. Please subscribe and hit the hype button to support the Soul Stirring Stories channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing emotional, soul-touching stories that celebrate kindness, resilience, and the transformative power of love. Until the next story, stay kind, stay hopeful, and let love lead you home.